4 recruits, 1 woman, 45 seconds of silence, and a lifetime of regret. The mess hall buzzed with the usual lunchtime chaos. Forks clinked against metal trays. Boots scuffed tile. Conversations overlapped in a low rumble, most of them filled with nervous banter from new faces trying to sound like they belonged. Then the double doors swung open. She walked in with no announcement. No salute, no swagger. Just a tray in her hand and eyes that didn't bother scanning the room. She moved like she owned the floor but didn't care who noticed. Her shirt was plain, standard issue. No rank on the collar. Hair tied back, face unreadable. Most assumed she was a logistics officer, maybe admin or medical. But something about the way she walked, the way she measured her steps, it was different. Recruits at table 6 noticed first. "Hey," said Ortiz, the tallest of the group, nudging the others. "Check her out. Think she's lost?" "She's in the wrong building," laughed Mason. "Probably here to file paperwork or something." Novak took a seat at the edge of the hall. Alone, quiet. She ate slowly, mechanically, eyes fixed ahead, not watching anyone. But seeing everything, the 4 stood. "Let's go welcome her," Ortiz grinned, grabbing his tray. The others followed, amused. Maybe bored. Maybe trying to impress each other, they approached casually, like it was nothing. Like she was just another face to test. "Ma'am," Ortiz said, standing just beside her, "you looking for the officer lounge? This is for the grunts." She didn't look up. He stepped closer. "You hear me?" She lifted her eyes, calm, cold, calculating. "I heard you." Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. A few heads turned, including one instructor's in the back corner. Mason tried again, flashing a forced smile. "Didn't mean anything by it. Just figured you might be more comfortable somewhere else." Her fork stopped mid-air. "Is that right?" Ortiz leaned on the edge of her table. "Yeah, unless you're here to recruit us." This time she looked up, fully, eyes steady, locked on his face. "You boys ever hear of Bud's Class 327? Ortiz blinked. Mason looked sideways. Jackson scratched the back of his neck. "No, ma'am," Ortiz said, half smirking. "Can't say we have." She stood, not tall, not wide-shouldered. But suddenly the air around her changed, like gravity pulled a little harder in her direction. "That's the class I survived." They stared, silent. "I was one of 12 who made it to the end. Started with 152. She took a slow step forward, her voice still even. "Week 6, Hell Week. We lost 22 in a day. 1 to hypothermia, 1 to infection, 1 to quitting." She pointed to a faded scar on her left wrist. "This one came from the pool comp. Hands tied, feet bound, 34 feet under. You pass out, you fail. You panic, you die." Her eyes narrowed. "I didn't panic." Ortiz tried to keep his cool, but his smile was gone now. The other 3 stood frozen, their bravado shrinking with every word. "Baghdad," she continued. "March 2017, building breach. 4 hostiles, 1 Marine hostage. We were told the sniper couldn't be taken out from our angle." She moved her hand slowly, index finger raised. 1 window. 3 seconds. In. Out. Her eyes hadn't blinked once. They said it was impossible. She paused. But I wasn't listening. The hall had gone still. Even the clatter of trays had stopped. All eyes were on her now. The instructor at the corner table rose quietly, watching. She looked at each recruit, one by one. "I didn't come here to impress you. I came here to eat." She picked up her tray. Ortiz stepped back, swallowing hard. Mason muttered something under his breath. Jackson didn't speak at all. The instructor crossed the room and stood beside her. He didn't say her name. He didn't need to. "To any of you wondering," he said, his voice low but clear, "you're looking at the only female SEAL in this command." A murmur swept through the room. Silver Star, Navy Cross, first through the door at Firebase Vulture. Cleared a 3-floor compound in Mosul by herself. She turned slightly. No pride in her eyes, no arrogance. Just experience. She nodded once to the instructor, then walked past the recruits, tray in hand, leaving nothing but silence behind her. And in that silence, they understood. They didn't follow her. Not one of them had the nerve to. The recruit stood frozen beside her empty chair. Trays untouched, faces pale with something they hadn't felt since day one of training, uncertainty. The kind that digs deep, not into the muscles, but into the pride. Ortiz glanced at the others. No one spoke. No one laughed. Whatever game they thought they were playing, it was over, and they had lost before it even started. The instructor hadn't moved either. He simply stared at the doorway she'd walked through, arms crossed over a chest full of ribbons none of them could name. "Sit down," he said quietly. The four obeyed without question. He took her seat. "You know what the hardest thing about training SEALs is?" They didn't answer. "It's not the physical, not Hell Week, not drown-proofing, not even the psyche evals." He leaned forward. "It's humility." Ortiz shifted in his seat. "You think she's soft because she didn't puff her chest or shout at you. But that woman's done things your nightmares wouldn't dare show you, and you mocked her like she's an intern." Mason opened his mouth, then closed it again. "Do you know why she didn't react? They waited, because she didn't need to. You were never a threat. Not physically, not mentally. She sized you up in 3 seconds and decided none of you were worth her time." Jackson looked down at his tray. "You think SEALs are made by muscle? You think they come out of the surf zone with ego and attitude? That's what breaks first out there." The instructor's voice dropped lower. "Novak didn't just survive. But she changed it." They looked up. She was the first woman allowed to attempt the program. There wasn't a plan for her. No special category. No adjusted standards. They threw her into the fire with the rest. And she came out steel. Ortiz looked confused. "Sir, I thought that wasn't possible. Like, officially." The instructor gave a dry smile. "You really think you'd know if it was? There's a reason her name isn't in the news. SEALs don't do interviews, especially not her." He stood. "But if you want to learn something today, learn this. What you just witnessed was grace under pressure. That's leadership. That's control." He looked toward the doorway again, "And that's what you become after. You've carried a teammate's body on your back, through enemy lines because extraction failed." The hall remained silent. In the barracks that night, Ortiz sat at the edge of his bunk, scrolling on his tablet. He searched her name, Sierra Novak. Nothing came up. Not on social, not on the SEALs' official rosters, but buried deep in an archived military citation database. He found it, LTO Commander S. Novak Operation Copper Echo Baghdad, 2017 Silver Star recipient. He clicked it. The details were minimal. Single operator breach of enemy compound. Rescued 1 Marine hostage. Neutralized 6 enemy combatants. Sustained injuries but completed extraction on foot. Refused medical evac until the wounded were secured. Recommended for Navy Cross. Declined publicity. Ortiz read the report twice. Then he looked at the faded photo attached. Black and white, no smile. Just those same eyes. Calm, focused, untouched by noise. He leaned back against the wall. Across the room, Mason quietly closed his own screen. "Found it too?" Ortiz asked. Mason nodded. She wasn't just first. She might be the best. None of them responded for a long time. At 600 the next morning, Sierra was already on the track, alone, running steady laps while most of the recruits were still rubbing sleep from their eyes. Ortiz saw her. He jogged out anyway, didn't say a word, just joined her pace, a few seconds behind. Silent. By lap 3, Jackson joined. Then Mason, then the last one, all in line, a step behind her. Not equal, not yet. But learning, Sierra didn't look at them. She didn't need to. Respect had arrived quietly. No orders, no speeches, no confrontation. Just recognition. And from that moment on, the recruits never forgot the first real lesson they learned on base. Not from a drill. Not from a textbook, but from a woman who walked into a mess hall alone and didn't have to raise her voice to command the entire room. She was gone by the time they finished the 4th lap. No words, no nod. Just vanished, like she'd been a shadow moving across their morning routine. Ortiz stopped first, hands on his knees, chest heaving. Mason followed, sweat dripping from his jawline. The silence between them said everything. No one dared speak her name unless it was earned. Back inside the barracks, Ortiz sat at the corner of his bunk, towel around his neck, mind still racing. He wasn't thinking about drills or inspections or even the next ruck. He was thinking about her, about what it meant to sit across from someone who had stared death in the face and didn't blink, about how different she was from the rest of the decorated officers they'd met. Louder ones, flashier ones. She was the kind who didn't need a stage. He picked up his notebook and scribbled something. Just one word. Watch. The rest of the day moved in fragments. Quick orders, faster drills, no time to think. But every now and then, one of the recruits would glance toward the edge of the base, toward the hangars or the obstacle course or the tracks, looking for her. She didn't show. Not during training. Not during mess. Not during inspection. It was almost like she'd never been there. Until that night. The lights in the rec room were dim. Most of the guys were playing cards, some half asleep on the couches, others chatting about girlfriends, college, or which instructors had it out for them. Ortiz sat on the floor, back against the wall, arms crossed, not really listening. Then the screen above them flickered to life. It wasn't plugged in. No one had touched it. But suddenly, there it was, footage, grainy, black and white, helmet cam. The screen shook with motion. A dark hallway, muffled breathing. Footsteps, soft, careful. Then gunfire, a flash, shouts in Arabic, a scream, then silence again. The image froze just as a figure appeared in the frame, female, small, carrying a wounded Marine over her shoulder. Blood on the walls, smoke in the background. The timestamp in the corner read, March 14th, 2017. None of them spoke. Then came the audio. Operator Sierra Novak. Confirmed extraction of PFC Willis under active hostile fire. Sustained wounds to left arm and leg. Refused medevac. Maintained radio silence to avoid enemy intercept. Evacuated Marine on foot 4 kilometers through open terrain. They all stared. Another voice played. Novak, this is command. You are not cleared for engagement. Repeat, not cleared. No response. Then gunfire again. More shouting, a breath. Then silence, the video cut. Ortiz looked around. No one moved. Then the instructor walked in, remote in hand. No expression. You all wanted to know who she was. That's who? He walked to the center of the room. You think toughness is measured in how loud you are? In how fast you run? That woman's held her brothers while they died. She's been inside rooms filled with gas and bullets and blood. And she still walks like none of it touched her. He paused. But it did. Ortiz swallowed hard. She doesn't come around much, the instructor continued. Not because she thinks she's better than you, but because every time she steps on this base, she sees ghosts. Mason shifted in his seat. Why show us this now? The instructor looked at him. Because you need to know what you're trying to become. Being a SEAL isn't about muscles or medals. It's about carrying things no one else can see, and doing it without needing thanks. He nodded toward the screen. That footage isn't public. It never will be. She refused the Navy Cross twice. Said she didn't need it, Jackson whispered. Then why is she still here? The instructor stared at him. Because even the best come home with scars that don't show. And some of them need to be close to the fire to remember who they are. The room stayed silent for a long time. Later that night, Ortiz lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, the faint hum of the air unit buzzing above him. He kept replaying the footage, the smoke, the blood, the silence, her face, focused, unshaken. He didn't know how someone could walk through that much darkness and still move like they weren't broken, but somehow. She did, and he made himself a promise. If he ever made it through this program, it wouldn't be because of pride. It would be because of people like her, people who didn't speak much, but whose actions echoed louder than any war story. And he knew, with more certainty than ever before, that he hadn't just met a Navy SEAL, he'd met the reason the rest of them wanted to become one. March 14th, 2017, Northern Baghdad. Operation Copper Echo. It was supposed to be a clean breach. 1 compound, 1 confirmed hostage. 4 operators in and out before dawn. But things don't go as planned in places where the walls breathe gunfire and every corner hides a heartbeat waiting to end yours. The Chinook rattled overhead. No talking, just red lights, tight grips on gear, and controlled breathing. The team leader gave the signal, 2 fingers down. Go! The rope dropped. Boots hit dirt. Sierra Novak was second down. Her rifle didn't shake. Her boots didn't make a sound. She moved like a ghost between shadows, clearing the alley toward the breach point. The compound was old, patched concrete and rusted gates, but layered with new steel reinforcements. They'd done their homework. Whoever was inside knew this place wouldn't fall easily. The team stacked at the door. Sierra took the rear. Inside, the air was still. No voices, no signs, but they all felt it. Trap. The first man breached. Flashbang in. Entry. Gunfire ripped through the hallway before the bang faded. One operator dropped immediately. A shot straight to the vest, knocking him off balance. Sierra stepped in over his body without hesitation, suppressing fire down the right corridor. Bullets shattered tiles beside her, but her aim didn't drift. She shouted, "2 left!" The hostage was in the back room. No time for a regroup. The team was pinned. Radio static buzzed in her ear. "Delta, do not engage alone." "I repeat, do not engage alone." But she was already moving, through the smoke, past the broken body of the first guard. Blood slicked the floor. The compound reeked of sweat and gunpowder. One hallway, then a hard turn left. She kicked the door open. Inside, a Marine, young, maybe 20, was tied to a radiator. Bloodied, gagged, barely conscious. A man stood over him with a knife, startled by the door crash. He turned too slow. 2 shots. Center mass. Another target behind the curtain raised a rifle. She didn't flinch. Dropped him. Then silence. She moved fast, cutting the Marine free, dragging him upright. His leg was shattered. No walking. She hoisted him over her shoulder and keyed her radio. Hostage secured. Exfil compromised. "Going dark," Command screamed in her earpiece. But she shut it off. 4 kilometers between her and the extraction point. Enemy reinforcements were closing. She carried the wounded Marine through the compound's back exit, slipping into the narrow alleys of Baghdad, staying low. Gunshots echoed in the distance. Searchlights scanned rooftops. She kept moving, 1 block at a time. At one point, she ducked into a collapsed building, pressed against a wall as a convoy rolled past. The Marine groaned against her back. She whispered, "We're not dying tonight." "You hold on." He did. Blood soaked through her sleeve. A round had clipped her arm. She didn't slow down. When she reached the exfil point, the evac team stood stunned. She emerged from the darkness carrying the man on her back like he weighed nothing. Her face was stone, her voice calm. "Someone get him on that bird. Now." She didn't ask for a medic. Didn't sit down. She stood watch until they were both in the air. When the footage ended, Ortiz stared at the black screen in his mind, haunted by a version of war he had only imagined, but she had lived. The next day, rumors spread. Some recruits said she wasn't real, that the story was exaggerated, that no one could do what she did alone. But others knew better. They'd seen the footage, heard the names, and when Sierra Novak appeared again that week, this time in the training yard, observing silently from behind mirrored sunglasses, every head turned. Not one recruit spoke to her, not out of fear, out of reverence. She walked the perimeter without a word, arms folded, posture straight, scanning the field like she was still reading battlefields, not practice drills. The instructor said nothing. Let her be. Ortiz caught her eye for half a second. She didn't smile, didn't nod, but she looked at him. That was enough. That night, Mason wrote in his journal, something he hadn't done since boot. "We train to fight. She trains because she already fought, and it never left her. She carries things we'll never understand, and somehow she walks upright. That's not just strength, that's something else. That's why the others salute her without being told. That's why silence follows her, because everyone knows. Sierra Novak doesn't talk about what she did, she lives with it." The sun beat down hard over the training field, casting long shadows behind every obstacle and every recruit trying to outrun their limits. Sand stuck to sweat. Muscles burned. Instructors barked with the intensity of men who'd seen war and wanted to make sure these kids didn't die in their first one. But something was different. The recruits didn't talk back. They didn't roll their eyes. They didn't measure each other like they used to. They were watching something else, or rather, someone. Sierra Novak stood near the pull-up bars, arms crossed, aviator sunglasses reflecting the heat haze rising from the concrete. She wasn't part of the drill. No clipboard, no radio. But every movement on that field shifted under her presence. No words, just gravity. Ortiz dropped from the rope wall, boots thudding hard. Dust kicked up, clinging to his arms. He turned his head just enough to see her, still watching. Mason grunted from the next lane, finishing his final sprint with a growl. He collapsed to one knee, chest heaving. Jackson pushed past the pain and kept going. They weren't racing each other anymore. They were chasing her shadow. That night, after chow, something happened that hadn't happened since day one. Ortiz gathered the four of them, him, Mason, Jackson, and Pierce. They sat on the floor of the barracks. No cards, no jokes, just silence between men who had nothing left to prove to each other, and everything to prove to someone who didn't need their approval. "She's teaching us," Ortiz said quietly. Mason raised an eyebrow. "Without saying a word?" Ortiz nodded. "Exactly." Pierce leaned back against the wall. "So what now? We just watch her and hope to be like her?" "No," Ortiz said. "We listen." "To what?" "To everything she's not saying." The door creaked open. Silence dropped like a stone. She walked in, eyes forward, steps steady. No one moved. She walked past them slowly, heading toward the back. She wasn't in uniform, just a plain black t-shirt, dog tags tucked beneath the collar, boots laced tight. Ortiz stood. The others followed. He didn't salute. Just stood at attention. She paused near the exit. Turned her head slightly. Her voice was low. "You boys want to understand this job?" They all nodded. She looked ahead again. "Be on the track at 500. No talking. No excuses." Then she was gone. The next morning, they were there, waiting before the sun had the nerve to rise. She didn't speak when she arrived. She just started running, and they followed, lap after lap, mile after mile. No orders, no pacing, just movement. At first, they thought it was endurance training. Then, after the 5th mile, they realized something else. It was about silence, about discipline, about staying in motion when everything inside you screamed to stop. She didn't slow down. They didn't either. After the 8th mile, Jackson dropped. Mason helped him up. Novak didn't look back. That was the lesson. Nobody was going to carry you, but they might run beside you if you proved you could stand. At mile 10, she finally stopped, turned, looked at them, not with pity or approval, but with clarity. "You don't get through war by being tough," she said. "You get through it by being ready." They didn't answer. She nodded once, then walked off the track. They stood there, drenched in sweat and silence, hearts hammering in their chests. Ortiz turned to the others. "She just ran 10 miles to say one sentence." Pierce wiped his face. "And I feel like I just got promoted." They laughed. A quiet, tired laugh. The kind that said they finally understood. That night, one of the instructors posted a new photo on the board near the mess hall. It wasn't labeled. It didn't need to be. It was a grainy still from that helmet cam. Sierra Novak, eyes forward, body covered in dust and blood, carrying the Marine on her back through a shattered alley. Underneath it, someone had written in pen, "Respect isn't taught. It's earned in silence." The recruits stopped and stared at it. One by one, every time they passed, and slowly, the culture changed. Less talk, more action, less ego, more grit. They weren't trying to impress each other anymore. They were trying to earn the silence she walked in. Because now, they knew. Real strength doesn't announce itself. It walks through a room and says nothing. And somehow, that's louder than anything else. Rain hit the asphalt in steady taps, soft at first, then harder. Most recruits were still in their bunks when the call came, unexpected, sharp, Too early, even by military standards. Emergency simulation. Immediate deployment. No warning, no prep. Just gear up and move. They scrambled out, boots slamming the floor, packs half-zipped, adrenaline pumping. The sky was still black, the kind of dark that pressed on your shoulders. Trucks were already waiting at the gate. No one knew what was coming. That was the point. Ortiz jumped onto the second truck. Mason landed beside him, helmet crooked, breathing fast. "Think it's just a drill?" Mason asked. Ortiz didn't answer. He didn't need to, because Sierra Novak was already there, standing beside the lead vehicle, arms crossed, soaked to the skin. Unmoved by the storm, she didn't look like an officer. She looked like part of the weather, unpredictable, sharp, undeniable. The engines roared. No one spoke. 30 minutes later, they were dropped in the woods, thick, wet, cold. The kind of terrain that slows down even the best. Mud swallowed their boots. Vision was limited. Radios were scrambled. A single objective was given. Rescue the downed pilot. Bring her back. Don't get caught. That was it. No coordinates. No markers. Just a general direction, and the storm pressing harder with each step. They moved in 2 teams. Ortiz led his, Mason, Jackson, and Pierce behind him. The forest closed in fast. Every branch looked like a rifle. Every sound a threat. They advanced low and quiet, boots slipping in the sludge, water running down their necks. 15 minutes in, Pierce spotted the flare. Red smoke. They picked up the pace. The signal was coming from a small ravine, barely visible through the trees. As they crept closer, they saw her. Flight suit torn, leg bleeding, one hand clutching a pistol. The pilot. She raised the gun when they approached. Didn't speak. Just stared through the scope. "Friendly," Ortiz whispered, hands raised. "We're your evac," she hesitated, then lowered the weapon. "I don't care who you are," she muttered. "Just get me out." They lifted her between Mason and Jackson, moving fast now. The signal flare had drawn attention, of course it had. Every second they stayed, the chances of simulated capture rose. They barely got 50 yards before the first shot rang out. Paint round, bright yellow, straight to Pierce's shoulder. He dropped. Cursing, they were compromised. "Go!" he shouted. "Leave me." Ortiz hesitated. Then she appeared. Sierra Novak, out of nowhere. She pulled Pierce up by his vest and shoved him forward. "No one gets left," she snapped. "Not today." No one questioned her. They ran. Sierra took point. Bullets, real or not, came from every angle. The enemy team was better than expected. Organized, tactical, like they knew their moves before they made them, which meant only one thing. This wasn't a drill. It was a test, not of speed, not of endurance, but of trust. Novak led them through a narrow creek, water rising to their knees. She moved like she'd memorized every inch of the terrain, like she'd been dropped in places far worse than this and made it out without a map. Ortiz shouted over the wind, "How do we know where the extraction is?" She didn't look back. You don't. They pressed on. Finally, they reached the clearing. The evac marker blinked red under a plastic sheet, barely visible in the rain. A single rope ladder dropped from the helo above. Only one ladder. 5 men, 1 injured pilot. Mason looked at Novak. "You're first." "You found it." She shook her head. "She goes first," she said, nodding to the pilot. "What about you?" "I'm not leaving." Ortiz stepped forward. "We're not leaving you." She stared at him, rain streaking her face. "You don't get to decide." "That," Ortiz hesitated. But the pilot needed out. Badly. He clipped her. In they pulled her up. Mason and Jackson followed. Only Novak and Ortiz were left. The helo pilot called down through the speaker. "Last trip. Storm's pushing us out." "Now or never," Ortiz gestured. "You first." "No. You've done this before." She looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "Exactly. That's why you're going." He opened his mouth. She raised her voice. "That's an order," he clipped in. The wind pulled him up fast. The last image he saw was her stepping back into the forest. Rifle raised, eyes scanning the trees. By the time he hit the deck of the bird, The rope was up. She was gone. Back in the woods. By choice, because Sierra Novak didn't need to be rescued. She was the one who stayed behind, so others could be. They waited for her. Back at base, the air was tense. Wet boots lined the barracks wall. Steam rose from mugs no one touched. No one joked. No one slept. The simulation was over, but Sierra Novak hadn't come back with them. Ortiz paced near the mess hall doors, his uniform still soaked through. He checked his watch. Again, 5 hours since exfil. Still nothing. An instructor finally stepped in, face unreadable. "She's accounted for," he said. Made her way back on foot. 2 miles out. "No injuries? Is she coming in?" Mason asked. The instructor paused. She requested to finish the drill alone. Everyone knew what that meant. She wasn't done testing them. Ortiz sat down on the steps, rain tapping against the brim of his cap. He'd seen a lot of things in the last few weeks. Broken egos, raw panic, acts of courage. But Novak's choice to disappear back into the storm after ensuring everyone else got out, that was different. That was something he hadn't known how to name. Until now. It was leadership. Real leadership. Not the kind that shouted commands from a dry tent or patted backs after safe drills. The kind that bled quietly in the dark and walked alone so others didn't have to. 2 hours later, just as the sky began to lighten, she returned. No fanfare, no announcement. She walked in through the side gate, boots caked in mud, eyes sharp, a twig stuck in her sleeve. The guards saluted. She didn't return it. She just nodded, word spread fast. Recruits lined the edge of the yard, watching her walk back toward the command office like nothing had happened. But something had. Inside the barracks, Ortiz stood up straight when she passed. She didn't slow, but this time, she glanced at him. Just briefly, a flicker of recognition, maybe even approval. Later that day, instructors gathered the squad for debrief. No chairs, no comfort. Just boots in the mud and words sharp as blades. "You all think training is about passing," the lead instructor said. "It's not. It's about exposure, seeing who you are when the plan fails." He stepped aside. Sierra Novak took his place. She didn't raise her voice. "You were told it was a simulation," she said. "That was a lie," murmurs, she continued. "What happened yesterday was designed to do one thing: separate the ones who follow orders from the ones who make decisions under fire." She looked at Pierce. "You stayed down. You yelled to be left behind. You failed the test." Pierce lowered his head. "But Ortiz," she said, turning to him. "You hesitated. That's good. You didn't run. You didn't abandon him. You looked for the next move." She turned to Mason and Jackson. "You both carried someone heavier than yourselves without stopping. That matters more than speed." Then she paused. "Let the silence hang. Out there, when it's real, there's no script, no referee, no reset button. Just your gut and your grit." She looked across the whole group now. "You want to wear this trident? Then understand this. It's not given. It's proven. Over and over. In the dark. In the rain. In the silence." Nobody spoke. She walked off without waiting for a reaction. That night, Ortiz stayed behind after lights out, staring at the photo still pinned to the corkboard, the same one of her carrying the Marine. Through that smoke-filled alley, a new paper had been tacked underneath it, handwritten, no name, but she doesn't lead with her voice. She leads with her spine. The next morning, the squad showed up early, before the bugle, before the instructors. Novak arrived last. Surprised to see them already running laps in the dark, Ortiz jogged up beside her. "You still running 10 miles?" he asked. She didn't smile, but she said, 12 today, and he nodded. "I'll try to keep up." She ran faster, and this time, he did too, not to impress her, but to chase the standard she set, 1 mile at a time. Graduation day came without music, no parades, no cheering crowds, just boots on concrete, medals in velvet boxes, and names read aloud like roll call before deployment. The recruits stood tall under a sky that looked ready to rain, the same way it always had. But this time, the silence felt earned. Ortiz looked out over the field, scanning the line of instructors, officers, and brass. She wasn't there. Sierra Novak hadn't shown up for the ceremony. He tried to ignore the knot in his chest. But it was there, tight, coiled like unfinished business. Like a page left unturned, the commanding officer called his name. He stepped forward, received the badge, saluted. Applause was polite, quick. He returned to his line. Still no sign of her. One by one, the rest of the recruits were honored. Mason, Jackson, Pierce, each with a story etched into their silence. None of them forgot the woman who carved that discipline into their bones. Later that afternoon, Ortiz sat alone on the edge of the empty track. Uniform jacket folded beside him, the sealed trident now clipped to his chest. He didn't feel like celebrating. Not yet. He looked up at the bleachers, and there she was, far back, alone, Sierra Novak, plain clothes, arms folded, watching. She hadn't missed it after all. She just didn't need to be seen. Ortiz walked up slowly, boots echoing on the metal steps. She didn't move until he was just a few feet away. "You weren't on the field," he said. "I'm not supposed to be," she replied. "This part belongs to you." He paused. "Only made it because of what you showed us." She turned her head, slightly. "You made it because you listened when no one was talking." Ortiz nodded. "Thought I understood leadership before this. But I didn't." Sierra looked out across the empty field. "You don't lead by standing in front. You lead by knowing when to stand behind someone, when to carry them, when to let them fall." He studied her face, the lines etched from years of weather, war, and silence. And something deeper, grief that hadn't softened, only settled. "Why did you come back?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Because someone once carried me. And I didn't understand what it meant until I was the one left standing." Ortiz swallowed hard. She continued, "You'll wear that badge like it's armor. But it isn't. It's a mirror. Every day it'll show you who you really are. Especially when you don't want to see it." He nodded slowly. Then, after a long pause, he asked, "Are you still in?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stood. "There are things I'll never unsee, never undo, but I'm still standing." She offered her hand. He took it, firm, steady, real. Not a goodbye, a passing of weight. He watched her walk away, down the bleachers, past the field. Into the horizon she always seemed to belong to more than anywhere else. Later that evening, the squad gathered for one final run. Not for time, not for record. For her, 12 miles. No talking, they didn't need music, they didn't need orders. Each mile echoed with every lesson she never said out loud. 1 mile for the day she carried the Marine out of the compound. 1 mile for the rain-soaked forest she vanished into. 1 mile for the moment she stood between them and failure. And the rest for the silence she filled with meanings. The sun dipped below the horizon. Painting the sky with a quiet fire, Ortiz ran at the front of the group. Eyes ahead, steps firm, heart full, because Sierra Novak wasn't just a SEAL, she was the standard, and now, so were they.